about it. So that
Right.
contributed to that sense of injustice. It's like here we are in America, and like we're supposed to have this wonderful legal system, and the very system that I was turning to for relief was making things worse because they weren't following their own orders. Like the judge just kept looking and said, "Oh, we'll give them another chance."
So, Lisa Johnson, you've got an interesting story. You're the co-founder of Been There, Got Out, a high conflict divorce strategist company. Is that what it is?
Yeah, so my partner and I are high conflict divorce strategists, and we specialize in something called legal abuse. And that's where our clients' exes, both male and female, are basically using the legal system to wear them down and bleed them dry financially.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It is. It lasts for years. It costs tons and tons of money, and kids are used as weapons. And yeah, it is really hard.
Speaking of tons and tons of money, through your many experiences, you experienced a $100,000 divorce,
Oh.
which which is unfathomable to me. I couldn't even imagine that. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Oh, I was going to say that that was just like the tip of the iceberg. That was just year one. There, I spent 10 years in court. That was the first year.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
So I've saved well over $1 million because I started representing myself after that time. But the $100,000 divorce in our community is unfortunately on the less expensive end. So I was lucky, even though I'm paying back those loans forever. But yeah, so I was with my ex for 20 years. We were married for almost 18. Never imagined getting a divorce. You know, hindsight's 2020 where you think, oh, there were some red flags I probably should have paid attention to. But we had two kids, and my biggest fear was destroying an intact family. Then my ex would use that, every time it was like, I can't take it anymore. Well, if you divorce me, then you're going to ruin our kids' lives. And so, 2 years before the actual filing, I already like the marriage was over, and that's like a whole, other story. But so I took 2 years to decide to get out and to plan my exit. And then at that point, it seemed very clear that both of us were like, we can't stay together anymore. And so I filed. Actually, before I filed, I met with an attorney and really liked him. But within about 20 minutes, he said, yours is going to be one of the really bad ones, which was shocking because I said, and I thought, well, my ex he's a good person. He's just done some bad things, but I don't see why this would be so difficult. And my lawyer was right. It took a year, which in my state of Connecticut, you have 1 year after filing to work it out or go to trial. It took the entire year, like 2 weeks before trial was scheduled, we finally settled and $100,000 in. And my lawyer said, um, your ex is not going to comply with these orders, even though it was an agreement. So you better plan to go back yourself because he's going to continue to decimate you financially. And you can't afford me anymore. I'll be there if you need me in the background. I'll get you a paralegal, but you really need to start planning to do this yourself. And so he gave me some ideas on starting to establish a paper trail. And then when I went back about a year and a half and change later, I was on my own, and then 7 more years of and about 100 court appearances in 2 states, and yeah.
The
So,
reason why I say it's unfathomable to me because so poor people are much different. So
yeah, yeah.
um it, my divorce, I got divorced in 2006. I'm remarried now. Um but I got divorced in 2006 and it cost me 800 bucks. And
Wow.
I paid
Congratulations.
I paid for her lawyer too. So the $800 was for the whole divorce. Now we did
Amazing.
have a custody dispute, about 10 years later, but it got resolved. 3,500 bucks, I think, is what it cost.
You're so lucky. That's amazing.
Yeah, I wonder. I was wondering, like, what was that litigation over, if you don't mind? Was it assets or custody?
So it's the year long thing. It
Yeah.
wasn't about custody at all. We got the parenting plan done in mediation. And I did that by myself. My attorney wasn't present. He just coached me and then said, go for this. And I got it. And he's like, you wonderful. You saved $10,000 by doing that yourself. So it was really, my ex had a lot of property and assets and had been hiding them for quite a while. And I didn't realize that's one of the big common things in high conflict divorce cases, where someone is hiding assets or just assuming that whatever you have is theirs. So
Right.
I discovered that he had all kinds of rental properties. He wouldn't submit information on that. And so it became really hard with trying to get what's called discovery. So the information, because everyone is entitled to what's called full and transparent disclosure. Basically, each person has to financially undress so that the court or whoever can make a decision on how to fairly, I'm not saying equally, but to fairly split what you have. And he just
Right.
wouldn't show what he had. He kept saying,
Well, of
you
course he
know. And I was
wouldn't.
like, yeah. So that's what took a really long time. And then the reason that I went back to court was because we have two kids who were in high school and we needed to figure out college. So before that, while we were together, his father was very rich and said, I paid for my other grandchild's college. Like, I will pay for your, like, literally every single week, he's like, would say to the kids, I'm going to pay for your college. I would be like, oh, thank you so much. And of course, he didn't. And
Right.
then he died during the divorce process that year. He died. And then my ex also said, if you divorce me, I'm not paying for the kids' college. And I said, but like, I have my master's degree. I was an educator. I taught high school English. Like, why wouldn't we pay for college? And
Right.
so when the time came, in our state, there's something called a cap. It's a lot of states have it where it's the cost of what you would pay for a state school, and then usually the parents divide it. So in Connecticut, it's called the Yukon cap, the University of Connecticut cap. So we had to divide it. So I was like, okay, our kids, wherever they go, like, we need to do this fairly. And what are you going to contribute? Like, we got to, I think it was like 30,000 at the time. So I was like, so you pay 15. And he was like, no, I'm not doing it. And I just said, but you have to. And he was like, no, I don't. So that started the whole litigation where I took him back to court because I was like, well, we have these two kids and I can't pay for college myself. And you said you would. And in our agreement, he had said we would both contribute, but we would come up with the percentages later. And so when I went back myself, there was a lot of courts have a program where they have lawyers that will give you advice like for 20 minutes or so, but they're not going to take your case, but they can give you like general legal advice. So when I showed the lawyer the stuff, like I said, this is what I'm thinking of, she said, You've got a fraud case. You've got some serious other stuff like that." She said, what did you get in the divorce? I told her, and she goes, oh, no, this was like a really bad situation. So when you go back for the college, why don't you go back and get a modification for the other stuff because your ex didn't supply all kinds of information. And so I did, and that's what took the 7 years to. So it's all
That's
financial.
that's incredible.
Mhm.
I couldn't even imagine going through something that of that magnitude and feeling like I don't know if it would feeling like I was defrauded, through most of my marriage. What was that like when you found out that he was hiding things like that?
Well, I mean, the marriage itself, the marriage itself ended because I learned that he had been living a double life the entire time. And so that's what really hurt me was like discovering all kinds of things that have been happening behind my back. And I don't know if you've ever heard the term lying by omission. I learned it well after, but it's basically when, it's a type of emotional abuse where you are left out of the loop and you can't make informed
Yeah.
choices about your life because someone's been doing all kinds of things behind your back and so you don't even know what's going on. So it's very dysregulating and
Well,
I was dealing with
and
that.
you could be tied up in litigation yourself if something had happened on one of those properties, and he hadn't disclosed that information to you. Next thing while you're still married, you could be served with papers and being sued for an accident or a, a numerous amount of problems. And not only that, but like the financial aspect of that, having money and not contributing the money to the family, but having all kinds of assets that you didn't tell anybody about. I couldn't even imagine that. And then in the end of the day, going through the divorce, going through all the litigation process and finding out you got screwed. That's how did you how do you have such a positive outlook on things? I know that like because you don't seem jaded by the whole experience. You seem like you want to share the knowledge. You want to help other people through this process. And I know you started a podcast that's called Been There, Got Out.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
how do you keep the sunny disposition through all that, you know?
Well, okay. So during the end of the marriage and those years in court, I mean, I was devastated. Like I was not sunny. I was living with um every single day three emotions that I often talk about when I describe legal abuse, and that's rage, injustice, and despair. Every single day I would wake up and I'd be furious, not even at my ex, but at the system that this is taking so long. Like, can't, like, why are they allowing him to get away with this? Like, here I was on my own. He's got all this money and paying for attorneys and not following our order, and like no one's doing anything about it. So that
Right.
contributed to that sense of injustice. It's like here we are in America, and like we're supposed to have this wonderful legal system, and the very system that I was turning to for relief was making things worse because they weren't following their own orders. Like the judge just kept looking and said, "Oh, we'll give him another chance." And so it was emboldening my ex to behave worse. And
Yeah.
so it made everything like terrible. And then the despair was just like 100 court appearances. Like, how many times do I have to keep coming back? This is never going to end. And that's the feelings that all of our clients around the world share, is like, this is never going to end. Like, how am I
And
going to deal with it?
you guys are co-parenting during all this?
Well, so that was the thing. Like my ex basically abandoned the kids. Like he walked out, he moved in with his dad. He didn't have any place for the kids to stay. We had a parenting plan that said open visitations. You can see them whenever you want. Here's the holidays, joint legal decision making. And he just didn't show up. And one of the really sad things was my son saying at some point, I wish you guys had a custody battle, but he didn't even care enough to fight for us. Like he just didn't care. So that was an issue too. But in terms of the sunny disposition, I always say it took a long time, but justice and karma were served beautifully. And then me being pro se or self-representing, we got to the appellate level. That's like a higher court because my ex kept disputing the orders that kept being found against him. And so I represented myself against one of his attorneys, and not only won, but the case became case law for the state. It was published in the Connecticut Law Journal. And that's like I always say that's a huge honor for any attorney. And I've been told that they've never heard of someone who's represented herself being published. So that's like a really big deal that it makes me very, very happy.
Well, congratulations on
Thank you.
that. So my divorce may have been cheap, but I went through some co-parenting nightmares. My ex was just so it was all about control. And
Hmm.
if we had any money to litigate over, or if we had any property or assets to litigate over, I'm the type of guy where I was really young, really, really young. I was 21 when I got divorced.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was the type of guy then, and I'm still the type of guy now. If you put up a big enough fight, I'm done. I'm not gonna fight over objects or possessions. And but my kids, I'll fight
Hmm.
over my kids.
Yeah.
And um for me, she used my good nature for my kids against me. And she had created every opportunity to make me look like the bad guy. Always, I was always the bad guy. And the the thing was, is I didn't know that she was doing these things. She was manipulating people, talking about me behind my back, and then these people would smile to my face and be friendly. And meanwhile, half the town's talking about me, and by the time I find out about it, it's like, I don't really care. It doesn't bother me that people talk about me. If they don't have anything better to do than to sit around and talk about me, then they've got other problems.
Yeah.
So it didn't really bother me, but what it presented challenges to being a dad and a good dad. I always thought I was a horrible person. These people spent years telling me I was a bad guy and telling me, well, you're just a shitty dad and you're not any good and you're not good when times are good. And so I kind of took on that persona. The coffee with bearded bad dad is kind of about that, is because these people in my life, my ex-wife, her parents, her siblings, um, would tell me I was a bad person because I wasn't doing these things. But in reality, I was doing those things, but she was hiding the fact that, like child support, I was ordered to pay, like, what it seems like a small number, but $425 a month
Hmm.
for one child. I was making $12 an hour,
Hmm.
and I always paid. And
Yeah.
she I all his clothes, I paid for all his clothes, his coats, his jackets, his shoes, haircuts. Every haircut the boy ever got, I got.
Hmm.
And instead of giving me credit for that, she would lie by omission, and tell him, oh well, I didn't get any child support, and ended up, you know I was blindsided like 12 years later when I'm finding out all these accusations are like, how are you getting custody when you don't do this and you don't do that? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I've been doing that the whole time.
Hmm.
And it's just like, and now they find out she's a different person, and the whole dynamic has changed now. And it was, for me, it was, the co-parenting was easier if I just let her win or let her think she was winning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just bore the brunt of the responsibility. I bore the brunt of everybody being mean to me, or talking shit behind my back, and a lot of that stuff I didn't even know about, but I bore the brunt of that during the whole co-parenting process. And the biggest, when you said legal abuse, it it struck a nerve, because like I don't think I went through like legal abuse, but I think that the legal system was used in as leverage against me to get me to comply so we don't have to go to court.
Absolutely. So what you're describing is post-separation abuse, and legal is one type of it. And most of our clients, well, actually, there's a quote that I use because most of our clients feel this, and that is from a guy named Steve the Bodyguard, and he says an abuser's greatest tool is fear. So a lot of our clients walk around with the sense that if they're not perfect, they're going to get in trouble and their ex is going to take them back to court. And they threaten these three things: I'm going to leave you homeless, penniless, and childless. And the childless part is I'm going to turn the kids against you and I'm going to make the kids believe that you're unsafe, unloving, or unavailable. And so that's actually the topic of the book that we're working on right now, which is how to handle when your ex turns the kids against you, because that is the most common thing we see kind of embedded in legal abuse is using children as weapons and making kids think that you are this not just a bad parent but a bad person. And so it's this punishing thing, because that's what they really want to do. Is once you split up with somebody who's got some kind of personality issue or they're just abusive, it's not like a normal breakup where anger subsides and people go on with their lives. It's that other person has this clinging kind of hate, and they will do whatever they can to destroy you. So in their minds, it's not just a breakup, it's you're triggering these deep feelings of abandonment. And it doesn't even matter who ended the relationship. But there's this like, oh my gosh, I feel abandoned. And now I feel like a failure as a spouse or as a partner. And so I can't deal with all this discomfort. So it turns into rage. And so now I'm going to attack, and I need to prove to everyone that I'm the victim and you're the villain. And
Yeah.
so I need to make everyone believe, because appearances matter so much, that I'm the one who everyone should feel sorry for because I can't take any responsibility. And so it's called splitting. It's like this total black and white thinking. It's you're with me or against me. And kids are put in the middle of that as well, where it's like you have to choose. It's called a loyalty conflict. So if you love me, the one parent, then you have to hate or discard your other parent. Does that feel familiar?
Yeah, yeah, it does. It does. And so we had all kinds of issues before we had gotten divorced, and the fights had gotten physical at times.
Hmm.
I was arrested for domestic violence.
Very
Um,
common in our world too.
yeah, so it was in my mind. It was just a just like a compilation of issues coming together all at once. We were toxic to each other.
Hmm.
I brought out the worst in her. She brought out the worst in me, and we weren't good together. However, like there may have been like some kind of trauma attachment for both of us because we didn't want to. At the end of the day, neither one of us really felt like what? Why are we doing this? Why are we splitting up? And for I like I said, we were toxic to each other, and we didn't realize that. And neither one of us had ever had healthy relationships. So we didn't know what the process looked like. We didn't know how we were going to proceed. But ultimately, we did split up, and there was a separation. And I met who is now my wife, and she had many different relationships, and ultimately she got married. Her husband died, and then she's married again. And our child is now, he just turned 21. But the process of getting divorced, that I mean, that wasn't really difficult, like I said, because it was very cut and dry. And it only cost $800. We had no assets to split, so
Hmm.
it was basically just a parenting plan. And the state made that decision for us.
Hmm.
And the manipulation afterwards, though, was horrible. And
Hmm.
I remember feeling like it was never going to end. But now that it's over, it's like, and I went through so much that I have a hard time remembering all of it. I have a hard time expressing how it made me feel during the time because I wasn't going through it alone.
Yeah.
The kid was going through it with me. My
Right.
wife was going through it with me. We have other kids, and it was just the emotional strain that puts on kids. Like I don't know what kind of parent could do that to a child intentionally and then think unironically that they are the better parent. I don't
Yeah.
know how that happens. I don't know. I really don't like. How do you what is the mental gymnastics that a person has to do to think, oh, I'm going to use my child as a weapon, and then not think that they are a bad person for doing that?
I mean, think about like someone who's got a mental illness, like narcissistic personality disorder or borderline or something like that. When somebody has a mental illness, they see the world differently. Like most, that's why these high conflict cases, it's only about 10% because the rest of the world doesn't behave like that. So it usually is someone who has some kind of personality disorder where they're not thinking about whether they're a good person or a bad person. They're just doing what feels right to them. A lot of people with those kinds of issues require what's called supply. They need an audience. They need people around to make them feel like they matter. And that's why often post separation, the communication between people is where they will continue to sort of terrorize because they don't care if it's your positive attention or your negative attention. You need to show that you that they matter by still engaging. That's what they want. And so when they do this to children, it's because to they can't just feel like I'm a good parent or I'm a good person. It's like I need to have people prove to me because I don't
Yeah,
have that sense of self. That part has been damaged
yeah,
probably from something in their childhood. And so just like anyone else, like you abandon them, and if a child shows that they love you too, that feels like abandonment too. So the child has to decide, like, I'm going to basically obey and do what this parent wants, and the child on some level realizes that this parent's love is conditional, and that's why they work harder. And then the what's called the target parent, like the victim parent, the real victim parent, has gotten away, and sometimes kids turn against that parent because it's the path of least resistance. They'll be like, I know
Yeah.
you love me, you'll be there for me, but I got to deal with this parent. I got to meet this parent's needs. And it really affects people in so many ways detrimentally as they get older. The parent who's trying, that we call it the preferred parent, they're the ones who are trying to sever a natural attachment bond that your child
Yeah.
had with you, because children are born with attachment to both parents. So one parent tries to make the child take the child away from that parent, they're laying the groundwork for the way that child interacts with all of their future relationships. It makes it hard for them to connect with others because of the stuff that they're going through in their family of origin. And one of my really good friends, we were just talking last night, and she's like 60 now, and she's been having all kinds of serious health issues lately. And she's one of these like very sunny people, and like she kind of ignores anything, but she's like, oh, I'm just going to be like super optimistic. And now her body is having all of the like tremendous health issues where she can't figure out what's wrong. She's having these tremors, and no one can diagnose it. And she found out that it's actually something neurological, but it's not physical. Like there's nothing
Right.
actually wrong with her body. So it's something in the brain. And she started thinking back to, now she's seeing a therapist for the first time in her life, and she's working with an energy healer. And those of us in New York, a lot of us aren't so much into the woo-woo stuff, even though it's super helpful. So she was telling me about it, and she was always embarrassed, but she's like, it's really working. But I'm realizing that things from my childhood and the way that my mother was, with I had to be perfect all the time and I was never good enough, and she was mad at me every time I'd like succeed in something, and I never got angry. I just had to sort of support her and her feelings, and everything was about her. And now I'm getting mad, and I'm like, good, because probably your inability to get angry, because that's how you were groomed your whole life. It's somebody else's feelings matter more than mine. It's affected her, and her body is suffering, and hopefully this will be something to help her get better, you
Yeah,
know.
that's interesting. Wh- So you had mentioned, like the preferred parent, how they are perceived and how things are. It turns out I was actually the preferred parent for my son. Like he preferred to be with me,
Hmm.
and I had a hard time accepting that because of the things that I had been told, like, and it wasn't just, it wasn't just my ex-wife who was telling me these things, like I had family members and people my whole life telling me like, oh, you're a loser, you're dumb, you're fat, and this, that, and the other thing. So it was a myriad of no support for me, and the reason why I carried that. But I had a hard time accepting that I was the preferred parent, that my kid wanted to be with me over his mom.
Hmm.
And because when I was around his mom, like, I knew she loved him, and I knew there was a strong mother and son bond there. But he was two. And so a lot can change. And I was in the situation like when I had to take him home, he didn't want to go home,
Hmm.
and he couldn't come back to my house fast enough. And he always, like when he'd get in trouble, I want to call my dad. I want to go to my dad's. And we always thought that, it was just his way of, you know, once he gets in trouble, then just run to dad's house or whatever. But it turns out that it wasn't actually that. It was he just preferred my house more.
Hmm.
And it wasn't because I always thought I was really hard on the boy, and I demanded things. I'm still really hard on him, for a 21-year-old kid. I'm kind of an asshole to him. So it's, it's, I am very conscious of those parenting things that how I do things affects how they will do things as adults. I'm very conscious of that. And so it blows my mind when I see or I connect with someone who has been through a lot of the same things as I have, but then they're a world away. Or in your case, you're in New York, I'm in Kansas City, and so it's like we're very far apart, and our socioeconomic status is so different, but we've been through a lot of the same things, and we've experienced a lot of the same things, and it's just mind blowing to me how those issues happen so I know so frequently, but people they don't identify those things as they're happening. And I think what separates me from a lot of people is I do identify those things as they're happening now, and I use that to my advantage. Do you find that in your everyday uh, with been there, got out? Do you find that your experiences are what the helps drive the bus for a lack of a better term, and your all the experiences that you've been through and that you've like the court stuff, do you find that it is easier to help other people do that than it was to do yourself?
Oh, absolutely. Because I always say I got my best education in the trenches. Like I didn't know what I was doing. I learned so much along the way, but my background is in education. So I was a high school English teacher. I was a writer. I wrote a book like 20 something years ago, and now this was our second book, and I told you I'm working on the third one. But so I had a lot of training in effective communication. But the things I was doing, even though I did prevail, it took so long and I'd do things wrong. Like I'd come in with these beautiful speeches and the judge would be like, just get to it. And I'd be like, oh, I gotta just like figure out like what to say. And it's difficult. So, but going through that has definitely helped me because I learned so much. And I think being been there, got out. So it's me and Chris, who's my current partner. Well, he's my business partner, but we're also partners in real life. We've been together for 10 years this month, and we both went through our own situations like this. So we have what I call radical empathy. And so we don't know anybody who does exactly what we do because not only do we have both the male and female lived experience of domestic violence, but me going through the courts for all of those years, especially on my own and prevailing and then getting it published as case law, that's huge. So it gave me so much confidence because as it was happening, I just felt like I don't know what I'm doing. And, people are like, why are you still in court? Or like thinking something must be wrong with me or that I'm a high conflict person because who would be in court, like
No,
all
I
these
like
years unless something was wrong
I'm
with them?
sure you felt like that's not something that you had an option for. It's
No,
not,
of course not.
that's kind of how I felt through my situation
Yeah.
is it not I mean, obviously there wasn't a whole lot of money involved, but and there was like no court litigation.
Hmm.
But the co-parenting thing, it wasn't an option. As I
Right.
was going through it, it's like, okay, this is what I have to do now. And I guess when people ask those kind of questions, they're kind of asking like, how did you have the mental fortitude to get through that unscathed? And then you're obviously like I'm not unscathed. I'm kind of an asshole. So,
I don't think
but
so.
I'm here. It's like I think when a lot of people ask those kind of questions, they see you go through it and you make it look easy. But when we're going through it at the time, it's like this, it's not an option. It's something that we have to do. This is our lives,
It's
and
torture. It's
it
torture.
really is.
Yeah. We always talk about how it's like you have your own personal terrorist because that's what they do. And the co-parenting part is super hard. We always say divorce is just part one. People are always like, I can't wait to get a divorce. And it's like, that's just a piece of paper. Now you've
Right.
got the rest of your life and your kid's life that you have to still deal with this person. And so the communicating with the exes, that's been the most difficult thing for everyone that we deal with who has children. And we just came out with a course because one of the things we teach more than anything is strategic communication. And the course is called How to Communicate with Your Ex Without Destroying Your Case or Losing Your Mind. Because we know that even though you are communicating with your ex, there's this invisible audience who could always get involved and you never know when if you end up back in court or there's a custody evaluator or a therapist or a mediator. So we're very conscious of being careful to use what we call court approved language because we know that we're going to be in it again. And so everything is could be a piece of evidence. So,
Yeah, yeah,
but that's
I've
a
heard
way to
that
get
court approved language. That is a term that I've heard. So,
yeah. Yeah. And so using strategic communication, we find is the number one way to alleviate that fear and get your ex out from squatting between your ears because their voice is in your head for years, after it's over. You saying that like feeling like you're this bad person because of all this messages that you heard, but yet your son prefers to be with you.
yeah.
That says more than what everyone else says, but still in your head, you feel like this bad person because
Well,
of
it affects my current
relationship.
relationship.
Yeah.
My wife and I've been together for 19 years.
Wow.
So yeah, we've been together for 19 years in August. So, and we've been married for 10, um, and 11 in July. But it affects our relationship because I seek her approval
Hmm.
all the time. And it really fucks with her because she is the type of person that doesn't like she approves. Like the approval's there. Like there's not much I can do that she wouldn't approve of because
Hmm.
I'm not that bad of a guy. But um I always seek out her approval. I'm always seeking out, her to give me pats on the back and stuff like that. And I I think that it probably comes from not having the validation and support many, many years ago. And through all the battles, like, and my ex-wife isn't my first ex. She's just my only ex-wife. Like
Hmm.
I've got two baby mamas that I'm not married to.
Hmm.
I've got three total. I've got four kids total. The the first woman that I was 17, I got her pregnant and we got into a few arguments, fights, and it was I don't know what happened, but she basically hid the kid from me for several years. And when I
Wow.
found her, we went through the court process of the custody and the child support and all that. And I was scheduled visitation for the first two visitations. I had to work and I worked in a construction job and it was like sun up to sundown sometimes. And
Hmm.
I didn't know when I was going to get off work. Court paperwork said 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock p.m. on Fridays when I had to pick up the kid.
Hmm.
Now, in my other co parenting situation, as I was co parenting already by that time, in my other co parenting situation, it wasn't, the court, the parenting guideline, it was just a guideline. We didn't have to follow those. It was only there. So if we couldn't get along, that's what we went by. And so I was going by that assumption that it was going to be that easy, and it wasn't. Since I wasn't going to be there at 6 o'clock, I had to forfeit my weekend, my
Hmm.
entire weekend. And that happened twice. And then one time I didn't have any food in the house, nor money to buy food. And I was like, hey, can you send, a couple lunches with the kid? And that was a huge issue. If you can't afford to feed her, you don't need to have her.
Mm.
It's like it's not I can't afford to feed her. Like I'll figure it out. I have places I can go to borrow money if I have to. But the thing is like I don't want to have to do that if you can help me out. There's just one situation here. And I was paying child support at that time and I'd already paid. So it wasn't like it wasn't like she didn't have support and it wasn't like I was being a deadbeat. It's just, circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that weekend, I missed out the entire weekend. And then on my next visit, her and her husband called and asked me if I would sign off my rights to the kid.
Oh boy.
And at that time, I had a, uh, I went through divorce and, I went through all the custody stuff with one kid through that. My wife was pregnant. And so well, no, she had, our baby was about what, a year old.
Mhm.
So our middle child was about a year old at that time. And we had, we discussed it. It wasn't just me. The situation wasn't just me. The situation wasn't just the kid. I had to think about everybody in that situation.
Yeah.
And it was a shitty decision to have to make. But I was going on the assumption that, my child's mom was an okay mom, wasn't
Mhm.
abusive or anything like that. I didn't know anything about the stepdad, but I knew friends who knew him. So I talked around and asked questions. And ultimately, the decision was for me to sign off my rights. And I now have a really good relationship with my daughter. I have a grandson. And
Wow.
uh,
That's
my
amazing.
my way of thinking at that time was, I'm not a bad guy. I'm not everything that these people say I am. And hopefully she will find forgiveness in her heart, later on in life. And we actually started having a relationship before she even turned 18. And, I watched her graduate high school, and now I'm watching her raise a family, and it's really cool, But that situation, I've been through a lot of those things, and I've been through, it's not easy as you're going through it, but it's at the time, like, what else can I do? It's
Yeah.
not like I can't just not go through it. I would rather not if I have, if I had options, but I don't have any options, you know? Did
Yeah.
you did you have any issues like did you have any parenting situations yourself when you were younger that kind of hindered this process, like the way your parents raised you?
So
Because I
my
know like your friend had mentioned some things in her childhood.
Yeah, it's interesting because like after going through something like this, you really look back and examine your life and think, how did I end up in this situation? Like why did I choose this person? And I think about so my parents are still married. They've been married for like 60 something years. It's crazy. And that made me feel awful because I was the first one in our family to get divorced, of course. I have two sisters and another one is divorced now too. But I think that part of it might have been, I don't know if it was cultural or generational, but when I was growing up, like I was born in the 70s, so I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and it's not like it was now where parents care about their children's feelings and children have choice and all that. It was like this is how we do things and that's it. Like nobody cares what music you want to listen to, nobody
Yeah,
cares what you want to have
my
for dinner.
mom was a
Like this,
boomer hippie, so
yeah, it's just like
yeah.
this is like what they wanted. That's what we did. And I think whether it was them personally or our family, but I just kind of didn't have my own desires and needs and feelings really honored like we do now. And I think I just kind of followed along what was expected of me. Like I went to college and I did my thing and then when I had some adolescent relationships which weren't terrible, but not amazing. And then I lived in Europe. I backpacked around Europe by myself right after I graduated college. And then when I came back, part of me was like, I better like settle down and like find like a partner and start getting serious with someone, which is so stupid because I was 21, 22. But it was like, oh, I better stop dating these men children, which I had always gone for like artsy, like heavy metal rock guitarist type. So I was like, I gotta find someone who's like not, I'm not the parent in the relationship. So when I met my
What?
ex, what were you gonna say?
That's half the fun is so I don't have to be with my relationship currently. I don't have to be the grown up. I just
That's good.
sometimes it ends up being that way that I'm the
Yeah.
grown up, but
Yeah.
luckily we can both be children together.
Yeah. No, same with Chris and I now. But at the time I was much younger and thought I should be much older. And so I got together with my ex-husband, who was a few years older than me, because on paper, it looked like everything was perfect. And he was the first one that my mom actually approved of. So I wonder if that had something to do with it. I was
Maybe.
never physically attracted to him, but on paper, it was like he's a little bit older. He's got money. He's got property. He's got a really good career. He's smart. He loves to read. He was also mirroring things that I love because I love to travel. I love to read. We live near New York City, so we always go into the city to do stuff. And so I thought this is the perfect person for me. And but because he told me that he had dated all kinds of women for years, but I was marriage material, put quotes. I was marriage material. And I was like the first person that he actually considered being with. So that flattery, led me into this relationship instead of me ever pausing and thinking, well, but do I even want to get married? I'm like 22. I mean, I know you got married younger, but that's still super young.
I didn't want to get married.
Yeah.
I was 18. As a matter of fact, we got into an argument the day we got married, and I threw the wedding ring that I was supposed to wear. I threw it across the room. I was throwing it at her, but missed.
Uh-huh.
Luckily missed.
Yeah.
But it was I didn't want to get married. I thought that like she was pregnant, so I her
Like it's the
family
right thing to do, right? Like
yes,
that's what
yes,
you
her
do.
family kind of pressured us, and it was one of those things where okay, I guess we're getting married,
Hmm.
and we ended up her ex husband at the time. So she was previously married and had two kids when I met her. So um, her in her previous relationship in her divorce decree, it said that she wasn't allowed to live with a man over the age of 18 and not be married. And so that's a weird thing here in Missouri that they a long time ago they were adding that in divorce decrees as a stipulation of divorce. You can't have any man living with you over the age of 18 unless you're married.
Okay.
And so we weren't married. Her ex-husband found out about it. Then he took her kids and crossed a state line and was holding them basically hostage and going through the court and trying to get custody because I was living with my ex-wife.
Hmm.
And so at that time, it was like, well, either we get married or I move out of the house that I'm paying for, you know? And at that time, like we didn't own the house or anything like that, but I was still paying for it. And it was one of those situations where, everything was telling me to get married. I
Hmm.
mean, except for my mother. My mom hated her.
Mm.
Like all the girls in my life, except for my wife, my mom hated. And that should have been, for me, it should have been, like a aha moment, uh, run these people by mom and see what she thinks first. But I wasn't ever like that. So like when I got together with my current wife, my mom said, if anything happens to you two, I'm taking her.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So it was like my mom, and God rest her soul, she's not here anymore. She passed away about 10 years ago.
Oh.
And um, it was the relationship between me and my mom wasn't always the greatest, but we had a pretty decent relationship. But my wife and my mom got along great. So that was, one of the things that in the very beginning I was like, hey, mom likes her, well, she's marriage material maybe. So
Hmm.
it was a pretty cool thing. So you talked about backpacking across Europe, and I know you got a hard out here in just a few minutes. I want to talk about that. Like I want to get you on again and talk about that and in the future. And I'm going to wait a few weeks to get a hold of you, but I want to have you on again to talk about backpacking across Europe
Oh,
because
I'd love to. Love
that's a
that.
whole different conversation that doesn't
Yeah.
involve divorces
Yes,
and
yes, yes.
so, but right now, I think this is a good place to leave this conversation. We've been all over the place, and we haven't barely talked about your book or your podcast or anything like that. So next time you're on, I'd like to talk a little bit more about that. But where can people find you?
Oh, so super easy. If they just Google Been There, Got Out, we're everywhere. So our website is beenthere.gotout.com. The book is called Been There, Got Out. Our social media is pretty big and engaged, which is great. So on Instagram, we're just Been There, Got Out with little underscores. Yeah, just look for Been There, Got Out, the podcast, YouTube channel. Super easy.
Awesome. So this is Lisa Johnson, and is your husband's name is Chris your husband?
No, he's actually not, but
So what's his last name?
his last name is Barry, Barry.
So Chris Berry and
Yeah.
Lisa Johnson, been there, got out dot
Yep.
com.
Yep.
Awesome. We'll see you next time, guys. Bye.